In this video we're going to build a small project up, and we're going to use three Node-RED nodes over here, and we're going to use simulated data or generate simulated data and push that into InfluxDB. And this video is going to be focusing on a 64-bit operating system, so it's going to be InfluxDB version 2. And the process is slightly different for a 32-bit, so I'll do a video about that at a later date. So the nodes that we're going to use the Inject Node, the Change Node, the Debug Node. So these are three standard nodes. I'll go into these in a minute. And then we're going to use an InfluxDB node. Now by default this isn't installed. So to install this, make sure that your hardware where Node-RED is installed, so in this case it's on a Raspberry Pi, has a connection to the internet. Because it's on my Wi-Fi and that has a connection, then everything is cushy. But let's go and have a look over here. So let's manage our palette. So this is where we can update our nodes. I already have this one installed, so I'm just going to show you the process. So these are what I've got here in my project. It shows you which ones are in use. But let's have a look at installing this one. So it's InfluxDB, and you can see here it's the one I've already got installed. But for you guys and girls, just click on install, and then that will appear in this library. Once you've done that, the one we're going to be using, we're going to be pushing data out to InfluxDB. So these are all of the nodes that we're going to use. So the first node we'll look at is the timestamp node. And for this particular exercise, we don't actually want this Inject Node to do anything other than just tell our flow to start doing something. So you can build up quite a comprehensive list of actions here, but as I said, we don't want it to do anything other than, say, energize our flow. I'll come on to this bit in a minute. So as we get going, we're going to use this to automatically generate data on startup and then keep injecting it, say, once every second. Now, of course, as I said about documentation, we need to make sure that we have something that says something other than timestamp. So that's all I want this node to do. Sorry if this looks like I'm jumping around. I noticed a bit of a mistake on my recording. But the next node, even though this is complete, that we were going to look to build this routine up was the change node, which is down here. So let's have a look at how we've built this in. So what the change node is doing is basically moving information and giving us some sort of output. What we want to achieve is to store process values in global memory. But to make it interesting, we want to randomize those values. So let's have a look at what we've done with these flows. So you can add as many of these as you want. So you can see down here I've added a couple. You can delete them. But what we're doing is we're going to set a global memory location that we're going to call temperature. And I'm only going to push it into memory because it's a process value. I don't need to store this in file, so I'll leave it set at memory. So we're going to do that, and then we're going to use a Java expression here, and we're going to randomize this. So we're going to have a starting position of 50, and then we're going to use the random command. So we're going to have a random value of around 50. Then we're going to set another area in global memory called density. We're going to give that the same Java expression, but density of water is 998-ish, depending on temperature. So I'll put it at 1,000, and then I'll randomize that again, so that you're going to get two global memory areas, and then a timestamp. So we can have a global timestamp It's a bit pointless doing this, by the way, because you can just call the timestamp wherever you want. So I can call it within my function, which you'll see in a minute, but I'm doing it here for completeness. I've created a global memory area called timestamp, and then you'll see I can actually pull the timestamp. It's a fixed function within Node-RED. So I've done that. There's no point in putting a debug on here because there's actually no message payload coming out of this function. Yeah? So it's just going to push this action all the way through after, but in the background it will move to these areas. So if I go to my context data now, you will see here I have density. So every time I click on this and do a refresh, I will have a new value. So I can't put a debug on because the debug is looking at the message coming out of here, and there physically isn't any message. So that's how you can use the changelog, and you can use this to do all sorts of actions. So I could delete, move data, but we are setting data in this instance, and that's probably the one you will use the most. The next block that we need to generate, or node we need to generate, is probably the most important. We need to generate a payload, a JSON payload that we can push into InfluxDB. And to do that, we're going to use this function node, and this is the most commonly used block within Node-RED. You do need some programming experience, but what we need to understand here is we need to grab data from our global memory location, put it into a little subroutine and give that a tag reference, and then push that out as a message payload. So the first thing we need to do is to start grabbing the data. So I've already started this, and hopefully this will make sense. So the first thing is to give this little bit of a subroutine, or this data, like a name. And it's just good programming, structure. We don't need to put this on, we don't need it there, but it could be useful for moving data around at a later date. So let's have a look at this first command. What we need to do first is pull the data from global memory and put it into a tag that we are going to use within our program. And I've already done it here. So var density, so this is the new tag that I'm generating. I've kept it short because I'm lazy, equals global get, so we're getting the information from our global memory area, and then the value that we want to get is density, and you can see here over on the right. Now you don't need a comma or a semicolon at the end for this command, so we'll do the same for temperature. So, and we'll call this temp to keep it nice and short, equals. If I put my mouse over it, it will start building this expression up, but we're going to do global, you can see here, global dot get. Yeah, so if it's not doing this, you've probably got an old version of Node-RED and it's worth updating it. But this expression builder is quite nice. We are bringing in a value, so we put the commas in, it's put both of them in, inverted comma, and then the value that we're pulling from global memory is temperature. So let's type that in. We've got the two values. We'll add the timestamp, and then we'll start working on our payload. So I've mapped in the timestamp here, but all I've done is I've moved this to temporary variables that I can use to create a payload. So to create a payload in JSON format, we'll use message dot payload, and you can see it here, so I can build the description up, equals, and then you could put it all on one line, but I prefer to open it up so I can see this. So what we have first, the first bit is the text description that is going to appear in InfluxDB. Yeah, so we'll call that timestamp. Okay, so we can see there timestamp, and then what is that going to equal? Well, we use a colon, and then it is the tag that we have generated up here. So we've moved the data from global memory into this tag, and then we're going to use this to set up our JSON expression, and this is the value that's going to be pushed into InfluxDB. So we'll use timestamp. Okay, it's in black. Now I do need a comma here, and then I can put the next command in. So we want temperature. That's going to be my description for InfluxDB again, equals temp, and that should go green. So that is my tag, and then the last one is density. Because this is the last expression in my JSON format, I don't need a comma. That sort of tells it that it's the last command. So here we have commas, we don't have one here. Then we close this expression off. So we're saying the message payload, it's a typo there, equals this, and then return message is saying that this is the end of our transmission. So I've got this on message, so every time it gets a transmission from my generating data, it will run this code, but you could do it on start, on stop. It depends how you want to do it, but this is like a runtime routine. And of course, I need to give it a name. So we've generated our code. We're going to put a debug on here so we can see what's going on. We want the complete message. Okay, and then we'll link this. We make the screen a bit smaller, and then we'll drag this over and put debug on. So I'll just clear this for now, and we need to deploy that. So it looks like my code is relatively good, so I'm going to inject something in here now, and then we'll see what our message payload. So I can see my topic here is influx data that I set, and then my message payload is timestamp, temperature, and density, and then I can keep injecting this, and I will get the value coming through. So then the next stage is to add the InfluxDB node. So we've downloaded and installed that. So let's have a look here. InfluxDB out, and we will link that. It's red triangle because we need to configure this. Now there's a couple of parts to this. The first one is I have to set my server, so you can have multiple servers. I've already set one up because I'm using it in another part of my code, but let's just have a look at how we set that up and where we get the information from. So here we have to say the version of InfluxDB. So we're version 2. This is just a text description. If we had InfluxDB in the cloud, we could put a HTTPS and we could put the full address here, but this is InfluxDB running on the same machine, so we just put localhost and then :8086. So what we need to look at now is how we generate this token. So to get this token, we need to open up InfluxDB, so it's very similar to how we open up Node-RED. House home 8086 is my port number, and it will probably land with this sort of home screen. Let's have a look. When you click on this arrow here, you get API tokens. And the first thing I need is a bucket, and I've already set a bucket up called house home. If you haven't got one, then you will need to create one up. But this is the database where you're going to push all of the data. Once you've generated that house home, you can see here you create bucket. You need then to go to your API tokens. I will then generate a token, all access. We will call this house home. Click save, and then I get this long code. Copy that to a clipboard. So to use the token, I've copied it here. Hopefully I've copied it right into my notepad. Open up my connection. We're going to the server, and here I have my API token. Paste it, click update, and then when I go back into there, look, I can't actually see the token. I want to see that. If I go to configured nodes, it's here as well. So this is used on all flows. This is my server. Like I said, I could have multiple servers, but I only have one. So that's the first bit we need to do. The measurement is just a text description. You push the measurement name through. So we'll call this flow meter. So this will be for each, it could be for each individual database that you're creating. It will sit within the house home bucket, so we can put that here. And then we need to find the organisation. Now this next bit got me a little bit pickled for a while. So finding the organisation reference within InfluxDB. So this is your screen, and you'll jump around these and you think, where the hell is my organisation? And it's quite simple when you know how. You'll see this little button down here to expand, and you can see here house home, and then my organisation is this underneath, IoT connectivity. So let's put that in. So we have our organisation. I've given it a text description at the top. Could be anything you want. I have a bucket here that says house home. I've already used this before and called something flow meter, so I'm going to call this flow meter 1, and I'm going to click done, but I'm not going to click deploy yet, because if I come back here, I want to have a look at Data Explorer, and I just want to show you this. So this here, house home, flow meter, when I click on here you can see my timestamps. This is the one I've already generated. If this all works, when I click deploy and then inject my signal, I should have one here called flow meter 1. So let's see what happens and see if I get this right first time. So let's put the debug on. By the way, I'll be amazed if I've got it right first time. Let's deploy. We can click on this to inject. Now it's connected to InfluxDB. If it hadn't done that, I'd have had an error message here. Okay, so that looks like a little bit of a success. So let's see if we can do a refresh, and we can see down here flow meter 1. There's my density. Now what if I want to see that, I can, the easiest way is go up here and just put this as a table, and don't forget to click on submit, and I can see here flow meter 1 density. Now if I click on density and temperature and submit, I should get both of those values up here on my screen. So if I want to do something a little bit more like a runtime session, that's really easy to do with Node-RED. So I know all of this is working. Let's just have a little look how we can tidy this up. So the first thing called flow 1, let's call this InfluxDB simulation, because it's not real data. We could put, if we wanted to, just a comment here as well to put in a bit more information. But let's automate this a little bit more, so we don't have to keep clicking on this button. So if we come into the Inject Node, you'll see this option here, and we can set it to interval. So if you just wanted it to inject once after startup, so you wanted to say write some alarm set points in once at startup, you could do that. But we want it to inject once every second, so let's do that and deploy. And you will see now my data is being generated every second. I'm just going to stop the screen. If I have a look in here, you'll see my payload is being automated. So density's gone down to 400, temperature has changed, so I'm happy with that. So now I can go back to InfluxDB. Let's have a look at that. Rather than looking at that as a table, let's have a look at it as a chart. Submit, and I can start to see my values. So I've put here last hour. Let's put this to last minute and submit. And there's some other nice things when you come to get this to auto refresh, because don't forget this is a web page. You can see here it auto refreshes every second. Aggregate feature I'll come on to. If you've got any missing values, rather than have a gap, it will just join a line in between. So you can see here my data is now being filled in. If I want to create a dashboard, because this is just exploring my data, so I want something a bit more permanent, let's delete this and create a new dashboard. We'll create a new dashboard, and let's add a graph, and then here's my data. It's automatically pulled it through, temperature and density, submit, and I can see my data here. Let's do that. So it's last minute, and I might want to do some nice things with the graph. So I can customize this. I can change my colors. I can change how it fills in underneath. So, and give it some labels as well. So I will have it the window as 1 second. Fill in the missing values. Submit. Now, when I click on the tick, I will see my dashboard view, and we can see here with the dashboard view, I've got set auto refresh. Well, let's refresh every 10 seconds. This is without human intervention when it will go down. And refresh the dashboard. I want to do it all of the time, so it's going to refresh every 10 seconds. I can confirm that, and this data now will push along every 10 seconds. I can see last minute, last 5 minutes. This was me practicing for the video. Oh no, this was me injecting the data manually. Then we talked for a bit, and now we've automated it. There we have simulated data being pushed into InfluxDB. The dashboard is okay. It's not brilliant. You'll see when there's other tools where we got better dashboards for historical data. I personally prefer Grafana to this because this aggregates the data in ways I don't really like. So let's just recap on the nodes we've used. We've used the Inject Node. We've used the Change Node. We've used this function node, which is really important. And then we've downloaded and installed the InfluxDB Node. We've set up a server on here, and we've set up a connection. So, yep, a little bit of a longer video, but as you can appreciate, we've learnt a bit more about some nodes on Node-RED, but we've actually done something and pushed data into a database. So we talk about this big data strategy. We now are starting to see that building up as we go through these videos. So I hope you found that useful. If you like what you see, please share it with your colleagues. Click on the notification bell because there's quite a few of these videos coming out. But for now, thanks for listening, and hope to see you again soon.